Morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Rabbi Howe, you're muted.
Chad, why is no virtual background today?
Oh, well, let's see.
I didn't hear your answer. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my audio was off. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You have pictures of
More
like every,
halcyon days, right?
you have pictures of every angle of our synagogue, inside and outside.
Yeah, I've been stalking it.
Yeah.
I think
That's
add them
great.
to the security committee.
For sure. I like that one.
Yeah, and Ron, you're not in Hawaii anymore.
Squire's Castle.
So my household lost power again during the Dr. Sarna's during his question and answer period at the end.
Oh,
But I
really?
guess it wasn't congregation wide like the earlier one during the Browns game.
No.
I never lost power, but I don't have a furnace right now.
Oh. And you're not in the picture. It's just Squire's Castle without Ron.
Hey,
You know, they don't have a
How's
furnace
that?
in Squire's Castle.
I guess that's a different
Now he
kind of
put
Ron,
himself
but
up.
that's,
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Who said good morning? I gotta see.
Linda
Hey,
Powers.
Hi, Linda.
Morning.
All right, we'll give people another couple seconds to come in.
I didn't want full screen. How do I get out of full screen? It's clean, dirty.
Dirty. Okay.
How do I get out of this one even? I didn't mean to.
Now,
Hello.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Morning. Happy
morning.
anniversary.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
It is morning for sure. There you go.
Feel like we need the Camp Good Morning song in a minute.
Good morning. Or the romper room song.
Whatever
Good morning, Miss
version you want.
Sally. Whoops. All right.
All right, thanks for joining me. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see everyone. I hope that you enjoyed all the different opportunities to learn and discuss from our Weingold Scholars Weekend. All the classes are available, or all the sessions are available. If you missed one or want to rewatch one, or got booted off of one and want to come back, they are all in entirety on our streaming archives. If you know where our streaming archives on the synagogue website, you just go to whatever, it's on the streaming page. So even if you don't know, just go to b'nai-yeshurun.org and then go to streaming. And then if you just look down, they're all on the Moskowitz Sanctuary group. So if you just go to Moskowitz Sanctuary and just look down, you'll see all of the discussions and lectures and sessions are there. So I highly recommend them. And of course, I can't but recommend the last session, Dr. Sarna's sort of key capstone or the last session. He is the preeminent scholar on American Judaism today. And I thought he sort of summarized the weekend very well. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Chat's still not working, right? The
I guess
chat.
not. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right.
Yeah, we had to we undid the chat for the weekend just to make it easier to text in comments and questions. It also was another security layer. We have to enable that again. Yeah, I don't have the power to do that. I have a call into the person who has the power to do that. So we will get that re-enabled soon. So if you want to chat with me, you can text me directly, raise your hand, make some other motion and, do a little dance in the screen in your box and we'll find you. Or you can just unmute yourself. So I wanted to talk today. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to do a little something, not off topic, but a little bit different than what I do, which is talking about prayer and how we pray, why we pray. And in particular, what I want to get to is what language should we be praying in? What language can we pray in? I'm not sure about you, and we'll get there in a minute. We're actually going to start with a very quick look at our Torah portion this week, but I'm not sure about you. Maybe you're a better Hebrew speaker than me. But when I pray my personal prayers in the Amidah, or if I'm writing a note to the Kotel, 9 times out of 10, I'm writing that prayer in English. I have been known to write a Kotel prayer in Hebrew. And at the end of the Amidah, when I sort of take my extra, however long, to pour out my heart with my own words, 9 times out of 10, I'm praying in English to God there. I'm not sure about you, if you want to call yourself out or, if you want to reveal your truth, when you're praying your individual prayers, are you praying to God in whatever your native language is that you grew up in? And if you're not a native Hebrew speaker, are you crafting those prayers in Hebrew? Any opening comments? And then we'll get to the sources and the comments, and I actually want to listen to part of a podcast together about this. Yeah, Lynn?
I do English because I know it better.
Yeah.
If I'm going to speak to God, I'm going to speak in a language hopefully he or she understands, since I understand it.
Yeah, and any
I
other?
speak in
Yeah.
English because I'm more comfortable with English. The words come more easily for me.
Yeah.
For Hebrew, I did my little Malone to check out the pronunciation.
Yeah, Sherry?
When I'm reading in the prayer book, I have for years tried to improve my Hebrew reading skills. So I read the Hebrew a lot. But if I really want to pray, it's got to be in English.
So that's exactly where I want to go. And thank you for saying that. And that's actually what the podcast is going to talk about, right? That someone is really working on Hebrew, praying in Hebrew, but when they really want to pray, right? They're praying in English. Any other opening sort of comments, thoughts?
Well, I know for me, I tend to like to say the Shema and the Ahavta, and that tends to make me feel closer. And then I speak in English. And then I say what I want in English, because that is what I understand.
So if I can, Ruth, go ahead.
I do Hebrew only.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I do Hebrew only.
But I get native Hebrew speaker, correct? Yeah. So Shani, also something that's going to both come up in the podcast and we're going to look at is there some sort of, I want to say this not with tongue in cheek, but is there sort of a magic formula that is saying certain prayers in Hebrew, right? Is there some sort of magic formula that saying the Shema in Hebrew has a different resonance than saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, as opposed to Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. There's sort of different doors open almost for us if we say one versus the other. I don't know. We're going to talk about that. Is it sort of and again, magic formula is wrong, but this sort of direct connection to God, perhaps, local number, by saying Shema Yisrael, right? I'm instantly transported to an intimate conversation with God, and then I can go into my English, where I'm sort of opening up my heart more. Any other opening thoughts?
I wonder if, like Shani and other people do it in Hebrew because that's how they were taught.
We're gonna, yeah,
they
it's a great
say-
question.
that you do your arithmetic in the language you were taught. So maybe the Shema is also the way you were taught first,
Hmm.
with the song and the movements and all that in Hebrew. Maybe that's why.
Yep, could be. Bill?
Yeah, sometimes when I read the prayers that are preset for us, I'm not always in total agreement when at least I'm reading the English. I'm not really sure that's what I want to be praying. And so sometimes I'll revert to the Hebrew where I'm less clear on what I'm saying, but I'm more engaged in the moment.
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah,
There you
Eileen, did you
I'm
unmuted
living
yourself,
blessed all
Eileen?
my life.
Yeah.
I think like the Shema, I would never think of saying it in English. Certain things, but most of the time I pray in English
Mhm.
because it's comfortable.
Yeah. Eileen?
I think the Shema, that's one, I think we just know it. It's rote. So it's like, it's not a big deal to do that one in Hebrew. You don't necessarily, and I think we do know it by heart in English too, but we know it both ways. So it works. That's why that particular one, I think many, I'm speaking for myself, of course, but I think many of us just, as I said, know it by heart. So it's like,
Mhm.
it just flows. But other stuff,
Well,
it's not flowing.
and we're gonna get there.
What Lynn just said about it's rote, that's the problem to me. It is rote, but I have no idea what I'm saying. I just know.
True.
Right, we're gonna address that in here. Yeah, Lita?
I do the prayers in Hebrew in the prayer book, but I know enough Hebrew that I know what I'm saying more or less in the prayers. And sometimes I check the English to make sure I'm doing the right thing. But when I want to pray from my heart or ask or thank God for something specific, I do it in English. And I think that's what you're supposed to do. You're only supposed to, I think I've learned, to do it in a language that you understand and know. And if you don't, do it in a language you know. And also, if you do it inaccurately in the language that you don't know, like Hebrew, don't do it instead in the language you know. I think I learned that once.
Great, yeah, we're gonna look at those sources. Yeah, you're spot on. Margie?
I was going to say kind of along the same lines of the Shema, but the things that we do together out loud as a group are comfortable in Hebrew because that's how we've always done them, and that feels like a service. As a when you were talking about the Amidah, but when I've been to services at some other synagogues and for whatever occasion, especially some Reform temples where almost everything is in English, it doesn't feel like. Not only does it feel like a synagogue service, it doesn't feel like the prayer that I know that it is, even though the translation is accurate. It's just not the same thing.
It's a great question, right? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? The question is, do you feel like you really fully prayed for you, right? Right. I'm not saying, yes, you prayed and they prayed there, right? But for you, was it a prayerful experience?
I may have been misunderstood. The only English that I pray in is at the end of Amidah, when I do some personal prayer. Also, after I bench licht on Friday night, when I do a prayer including health and welfare of my family and loved ones and our community as a whole, that's in English. Everything else I do straight from the Siddur. On the other hand, during this pandemic, I've been doing a lot more of the Torah reading in English, even though I'm not keeping up so much with the Torah reader. I'm just putting the Hebrew aside instead of following it word for word. I'm sitting and reading the English, and I did not do that very much before pandemic.
Great, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I want to get Shoshana, and then I want to start looking at some of the sources. Yeah, Shoshana.
When I read the Hebrew, I feel loved by God. I feel like the letters are lovable. In the Tower of Babel, when he dispersed everybody in all those languages, it said in the Midrash that the other languages are filled with sorceries, but Hebrew is pure. Hebrew, to me, looks like little flames of fire that gobble up evil. I mean, they have very special spiritual significance. And to me, but I don't know Hebrew well enough, so I regret that. and I
Yeah.
really want to
I
learn.
love it. Shoshana, perfect. So actually what you're saying and what everyone else is saying is we're going to look at, I don't know if the right word is a paradox or something. So the rabbis are grappling with this idea about, is there something intrinsically special, divine, magical, whatever you want to say, or direct channel to God with Hebrew, right? And is it more important just to say that, even if you're going to hear the podcast, you know, one of my great rabbis, he's going to call it, if I'm just saying gobbledygook, that's what he says. You know, if I'm just saying whatever Hebrew I can sort of manage that I've heard over the years and can sort of get out, if I'm saying gobbledygook, but it has this meaning or power, or is it more important, as sort of Lita said, right, to pray in it? The rabbis say, right, if you can understand it, you should pray in a language you understand. So let's go and start off this podcast and sort of listen to my friends, Rabbi Killip and Rabbi Tucker, and then we're going to sort of make our way through some of the sources and see what it means to us. Okay. Oh, I meant to do the Devar Torah first. All right, we're going to do the Devar Torah for 1 second of it. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your feelings. This is the two-second Devar Torah, why we're perhaps talking about this today, and then we're going to get to the podcast. I'm going to, do I need to share screen? Yeah, I'll share screen. Hold on. Somewhere here. But that's not what we're going to look at. Can you see a living library of text thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to the portion which is Genesis 5:21. Yeah, Toldot. Okay. So I'm just going to take us through this really quick for a second. So you can see this is the beginning of Parshat Toldot, which we read this morning. And Isaac and Rebecca are recently married. Rebecca is infertile. And this is where we sort of pick up. And then it says, Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord responded to his plea, and his wife Rebecca conceived. Now, is there a prayer here? Do we know what Isaac said? Nope. Right? It sort of, it leaves it to the imagination, right? So we're going to look a little bit at what the sources say. It says, and then 2 verses later, then she's pregnant and she's having a difficult pregnancy. You know, she's pregnant with twins and they're struggling in her womb, right? And then it says, but the children struggled in her womb, and she said, if so, why do I exist? And then after that, it says, she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord answered her. 2 nations are in your womb. So do we know what she said to God?
No.
Do you think that that this is some idea of perhaps Isaac and Rebecca were praying here? Could we read that in? Isaac pleaded, right? Isaac pleaded with God. And the other one says, right, that Rebecca, what was the word? Gotta pull up what my word was. Oh.
Inquired.
Inquired, thank you, right. She inquired of God. So, I mean, I could ask you, like, what language did they pray in? You know, we don't know. It doesn't say. Interestingly, I'm just going to give you the 2 versions of the rabbinic commentaries on this. One is when Isaac prayed on her behalf. There actually is a tradition that Isaac and Rebecca together went to Mount Moriah, the place where Isaac was bound as a child. And they prayed together there to God. It's a really interesting idea. And I'll give you actually the Midrash, the legends have an actual prayer. So I'll tell you what the Midrash says that Isaac said at that point. He said, here we go. Isaac and Rebekah went to pray on Mount Moriah where he had been bound on the altar. Isaac prayed again and again and again, pleading, quote, be merciful to me, grant me children, let them be from the saintly woman, Rebekah. And then the Midrash continues, Rebecca too prayed that she would be able to have Isaac's children. That's what the Midrash says. Interestingly, the Midrash says when it said, and Rebecca inquired of the Lord, guess what the traditional Midrash says for that? You ready for this one? She went to inquire of God. Rebecca went to the yeshiva that existed at the time. That was of Shem, son of Noah, to inquire how these unborn children would turn out. Since Shem was a prophet, he could give her God's message directly. Rebecca asked Shem to explain why she was having such a painful pregnancy, worse than any other woman had ever experienced before in the world. I don't know. I mean, did you get the sense when it said when she inquired of the Lord that she went to the house of study? Is that what it meant to you? So I will give you that commentary now, and then we'll actually get to the prayer question. I don't know if you have this. I don't know if you have this one at home. This was the Torah, a woman's commentary put out by the Reform community. URJ and Cantor Sager was one of the editors of that. It's a really great compendium. This is what they write. Okay. The word lidrosh in Hebrew, which is inquire, usually designates a formal consultation, in this case with God. The text pointedly omits any mention of mediated communication, suggesting that Rebecca addresses God directly, and that God responds to her with equal directness. The earlier picture of Rebecca, originally who we meet as a gutsy, independent, and resourceful woman, then continues in this portion. Yet, many interpreters, both ancient and modern, have distanced Rebecca from any direct contact with God. One rabbinic commentator claims, for example, that she went to a house of study. Some modern feminist commentators speculated that she receives the information in a dream. So, sort of unclear what Rebecca prays for, but there's prayer. I want to show you one other text and then delve into that original question that we asked, and that is, interestingly, this comes after another text, which is, I'm going to share it on the screen. It was from last week's Torah portion, which is Genesis 24:12. Okay. You might know that Eliezer, Abraham's non-Jewish servant, goes to find a wife for Isaac, and he comes to the well at where the old country where the family was from, and he plants himself at the well, right? And he waits for women to come, and he prays to God. This is his prayer. O Lord, Adonai, Elohe Adoni Abraham, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day, deal graciously with my master. Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townswomen come out to draw. Let the maiden whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master. That's a pretty big prayer, right? So it's really interesting that already a chapter earlier, there's a really long prayer, of course in Hebrew, by the non-Jewish servant of Abraham. So just sort of want to put out there, like, I don't know what's happening with the prayers. I don't know why Isaac's and Rebecca's prayer were not written. You know, it can have a whole perhaps story about that. But we already have prayer, and we have Hebrew prayer written now. Okay, so now let's jump to my podcast, and hopefully you will be able to hear it. Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, in the last example, he said that, you know, I don't know if the Hebrew supports that, but it says he said to God. But in Abraham and Isaac, and you know, in the other prayers, they were pleading. There wasn't an idea that they even vocalized it. So I wasn't clear whether they spoke their ideas, whether they thought their ideas, and so maybe there's a distinction somewhere in there.
Okay, I take that. I take that. Although the rabbis, again, they put prayers in their mouths. Yeah, but yes, that's true. right? It could be
Right.
that prayer wasn't
That's totally-
spoken. And again, if we think about Hannah, right, this is already like 1,000 years later, but if Hannah is the sort of ideal of prayer, right? She's sort of mumbling and you see the lips moving, but you don't hear the prayer, although in the Bible, it is written out what she prayed for. So I don't know if that helps either side of either version. So I want to bring up the podcast. Hopefully we're going to be able to hear. Please, I'm going to sort of like need a nod to see if you can hear it. So it is from Hadar, and it is a podcast. Wherever you get your local podcasts, they have 72 different episodes that you can read. And some of them are sort of relevant to our lives and some aren't. But I wanted to look at this one in particular, which is, if I can pronounce Hebrew, do I need to understand it in order to pray? So I want to sort of listen to a bunch of it. So we're gonna do sort of a 10 minutes pause and then another sort of 5-minute chunk. So flag me down if you can't hear it. Hopefully we'll be able to hear. Oh wait, I gotta optimize audio. Sorry, gotta do. Come on. Let's see if this works. Now I'm praying.
That's who you are. It's big.
Okay, hold on 1 second. 2 seconds to work on this. Of course, it worked before.
We're hearing it.
Oh, you hear
Hi,
it?
and welcome to
I just-
Responsa Radio, where you ask and we answer questions
what you're
of Jewish
telling me?
law in modern times.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm
we
Rabbi
can hear
Avi
it.
Killip, here with Rabbi Ethan Tucker,
Good.
Rosh
Talk
Yeshiva
amongst
at
yourselves.
Hadar, a center for higher Jewish learning based in New York City. I love this question. I think it's going to apply to a lot of people. It's a question about being in the process of learning at all times. And also, it sounds like in the process of taking on new observances, which is, I think, true for many of us in all moments. I think this particular situation probably plays out a lot. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts. All right, here's the question. While I am presently learning Hebrew and am committed to achieving fluency, I currently possess the reading and comprehension skills of a complete beginner. Given my beginner Hebrew skills, at present, I read most prayers in English, or a hybrid of rote Hebrew transliteration English. When I read 100% of a prayer in a combination of rote Hebrew and transliteration, I then repeat the entire prayer in English.
I'm going to pause you for a second since I didn't hear it. Did you hear the whole question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I want to just, like, the next 2 minutes, they just schmooze with each other. So I want to jump to when they start actually answering the question, okay?
Like transmission of the
And see, there is some
not at all shouldn't that into the depth of the question, into the depth of the question, which is you in fact are allowed, according to the Mishnah, to pray in any
Can you hear it
language.
now?
Tfilah bechol lashon. Okay, which is to say, big picture, you could have a prayer book that's basically entirely in English, and that's what you say every day.
So that sounds like the one question is, if I read the Hebrew, do I need to read the English? You're starting with the opposite. If they're working through the English and they don't get to the Hebrew that day because they ran out of time, maybe that's okay.
Yeah, because I think it's important ultimately for what the questioner wants to get at, which is what is the relative importance of these two recitations? And starting with the notion that actually the Mishnah seems to start us off on a plane of prayer is language neutral in terms of its legitimacy, effectiveness, checking off obligations. That's an important place to start. Now, there is a statement in the Talmud that complicates this. Rav Yehuda comes along and says, oh, you should never be praying in Aramaic. And the question is,
Good thing I never do that.
and the question is
Actually, I
that
guess I do it all the time.
your comical answer is actually part of how it's coped with. Part of the question there is he actually doesn't technically say pray. He says lishol tzrachav, to ask for individual needs. And there's some degree of sorting out where does that leave us in terms of prayer. There is a view that comes out of that and says, yeah, you should not be saying the private Amidah in anything other than Hebrew. That there's something almost like magical, lyrical about that prayer, that it's got to be said in the original, and that's the only way the prayer will kind of get to God, as it were. But other views, which become more dominant, say, no, even the Amidah is fine to do in other languages. That text was only talking about almost spontaneous formulated prayer where you have no text or fixed idea to rely on. That you should only do in Hebrew. And a third view, which goes further and takes your side of this, which is, well, that must be a statement about Aramaic, and it doesn't apply to French, German, English, Arabic, etc., etc. So in any event, what that produces is, with some degree of hesitation around certain parts of things, still a broad sense that certainly if you're not talking about Aramaic and you're dealing with some kind of liturgy, right? Like the thing you would find in the Siddur and open up, language is not a barrier to you doing it. And I want to be clear here, doing it in another language fully fulfills whatever obligations you have, right?
Okay, I want to pause us here for a second. So I'm sort of trying to listen on my phone to the podcast on the side. I think I sort of evened it up. So initial thoughts. So this is Rabbi Ethan Tucker and Rabbi Avi Killip, who have a regular podcast where they answer questions about Jewish law. So right there, pose this question, right? Normally I sort of pray both, I want to cover all my bases. I really don't understand Hebrew. I sort of, crush my teeth doing Hebrew. It takes a really long time. I pray I pray the whole prayer service. I pray a prayer in Hebrew, and then I go back and I read it in English so I can really understand it, right? And go forward and back. And so the question is, what should I be doing? And Rabbi Tucker presents his first answer, which is, what's the answer?
Be in Hebrew.
Hebrew. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Pray
Yes.
in Hebrew. Okay. Everyone agree that that's what Rabbi Tucker said?
Didn't he say bechol lashon, in every language? That you
Sounds like it.
you
Yeah.
you can pray in any language. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I know. He talks fast. He's a New Yorker. By the way, he's amazing. His father, here's the 10-second background. His father, Rabbi Gordon Tucker, just retired from a very long time as an amazing pulpit rabbi in Westchester, New York, at Temple Israel, I think, of White Plains. And he was at the seminary, I called it cemetery, the seminary for a long time. He was the rabbinical school dean at some period, and he actually his father, Rabbi Tucker, just got sort of rehired at seminary doing sort of some special projects now, sort of as a post-career after his long time in the rabbinate. Rabbi Tucker also, the Rabbi Tucker we're listening to, this is another thing. His mother is Hadassah Lieberman. His parents got divorced and his mother remarried Joe Lieberman. But he's brilliant in itself. He's a great rabbi. We spent a little time together at the seminary, and then he sort of went off and did his own thing and got his rabbinic ordination in Israel. So he's pretty amazing. Okay, so yes, I wanted to, if you can see my screen, let's look at this. Can you see the sources I just pulled up? Okay, so let's look at some of the sources he's already mentioned, I think, although I didn't hear it. Okay. Someone want to read this for me? the following. Lita, can you unmute yourself and read it?
The following are said in any languages. The paragraph of Sota, declaration of tithes, the recitation of the Shema prayer, the blessing after a meal, the oath of testimony, and the oath of a deposit.
Okay. All right, so as Ruth said, if you look at where my cursor is, Bechol Lashon, in any language that you are able, you can say Parshat Sota. We don't need to talk about that. Vidui Maaser, the declaration of a tithe, we don't need to talk about that. Kriyat Shema, the recitation of the Shema to fulfill the mitzvah every day. Tefillah, what does tefillah mean?
Prayer.
Yeah, what does that mean, prayer? Like the rabbis actually, that is a specific prayer they're talking about here.
Reflection.
Is it the Amida?
It's the Amidah, yeah.
Amida.
Yeah, so this is the prayer, just like, you know, it's not Ohio State University, it's the Ohio State University, right? What is the prayer, right? HaTefillah, the prayer is, of course, the Amidah, right? And then Birkat Hamazon, right? And oath the testimony of the deposit, right? This is from the Mishnah. This is the rabbis more than, 2,000 years ago. The main legal text, they're saying, you can pray in any language, the Shema and the Amidah. Are those, like, if you're going to say, what are the two core, most essential prayers of Judaism? The Shema and the Amidah, right? And they throw in Birkat Hamazon, which is pretty darn important too, right? All right, Lita, are you still there? Do you want to read the next thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and then that was from the Mishnah. Now the rabbis are going to discuss it in the Talmud, and this is what they say.
It is stated in the Mishnah that the Amidah prayer may be recited in any language. The reason for this is that since prayer is a request for divine mercy, one may pray in any way that one desires. The Gemara asks, but may prayer really be recited in any language? But didn't Rav Yehuda say a person should never request in the Aramaic language that his needs be met? As Rabbi Yohanan said, that with regard to anyone who requests in the Aramaic language that his needs be met, the ministering angels do not attend to him, as the ministering angels are not familiar with the Aramaic language. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult, as that statement of Rabbi Yohanan is referring to the prayer of an individual who needs the support of the angels, whereas this statement of the Mishnah is referring to communal prayer.
So this is the strange thing. So first of all, the Mishnah says pretty clearly, you can pray in any language. By the way, and this holds, like if we have time, we're going to look, even in the Shulchan Aruch, the major law code from 500 years ago. This was from Jews who were already living in Europe and other places and really exposed to different languages. It still says, you can pray in any language. But then they have this little footnote, right? In the Talmud says, can you really pray in any language? And they say, any language but Aramaic. Do we pray in Aramaic?
Occasionally.
Yeah, not just occasionally. Every single day we pray in Aramaic. What prayers in Aramaic?
Kaddish.
Right? Every Kaddish that we say, Kaddish, Chatzi Kaddish, Kaddish Shalem, yeah, right? Mourner's Kaddish, yeah. By the way, also Baruch Shemay, which we haven't been doing for a while, that prayer at the Ark that we say, which is the mystical, idea from the Zohar, that is in Aramaic also, right? And, I can think of a couple, there are probably a couple other prayers that we say that are also in Aramaic. So right, it's interesting that even the Talmud codifies this thing. Yeah, you should pray in every language, but not Aramaic. And yet, right, what some would argue is perhaps one of our most important prayers, the Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish, right? That's in Aramaic, and we're praying it during our service. So, I want to see, also it's interesting to see, right, that even like within our Hebrew prayer service, there are already prayers that are not 100% Hebrew that have been canonized or, have been set and sort of unchangeable on some level. So I want to continue. Any comments about the podcast or these two texts before we sort of listen to another about 4 or 5 minutes of the podcast? Nope. And you guys promise you can hear, because I can't hear a thing. Okay, good. Okay.
So that I want just lurking in the background as we talk
Give me
about
a
the real
nod if
question
it's still
here,
working.
which is, okay, given that English is a perfectly legitimate language to pray in, and given that I really understand it, and it's like an experience of full comprehension, how does that trade off against some degree of gobbledygook of I'm muttering these words? They feel kind of holy and enchanting to me, and I'm having like a Jewish identity experience while saying them, but I don't really understand anything I'm saying. What's better between those two?
Meaning, if I can work through the Hebrew or the English, and I'm actually choosing Hebrew that I don't understand or English that I do, maybe in an ideal world you do both, as this person is attempting to do, but if you just can't, which door do I choose?
Yeah. And the case for the English being better is it's just as legitimate and I understand it.
It's a solid case.
So that actually comes up in the Sefer Hasidim, quite surprisingly, in the Middle Ages, so in 13th century Germany. Sefer Hasidim is a really interesting text. It's a kind of pietistic text that's focused on all kinds of practices or restrictions, prohibitions among people who are really trying to live what you would call an extremely pious life. And one of the things that comes up is the case of someone who does not understand Hebrew.
We're not the first.
We're not the first. Does not understand Hebrew. That was often a gender divide in terms of the way people were educated, but there were many men who were phonetically proficient in Hebrew, but they really had no idea what they were saying. And the Sefer Hasidim says, actually, if that's who you are, it's better for you to pray in another language. Better for you to pray in Yiddish or German or whatever it is that is the alternative here. Because the point of prayer and of blessings, think about just like blessings over food. The point is to have an experience of gratitude, not to say a formula.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay, I wanted to take a look at that next source that Rabbi Tucker brings up. So I want to pull it up. Would someone like to read the next source? Oh, I didn't do that. Anyone? You can read. I can see most of you if you want to either raise your hand or say your name. So if someone want to read the next source.
I don't think
Volunteer reader.
I'm not sure I see it.
Well, I didn't put it up yet. I was looking for a volunteer before I put it up. Sorry.
Oh, but we have to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I'll put it up. Oh, you have to. This is like, if I can see it, I will read it. Okay, but then I have to close you because I got to see it. Okay.
Whoops.
No, I got to find it. Here we go. It's just one paragraph right here. All right, I'll volunteer Lita again. Thank you, Lita.
I wasn't raising my hand, I was enlarging it. This is from Sefer Hasidim 588:1.
I actually raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, I'll get you next time, Kathy.
If it will come to pass that a person who doesn't know Holy Tongue, Lashon Ivri, will come to you and he is a heaven-fearing person who wants to pray with intent, or if a woman will come to you, tell them that they should learn how to pray in the language they understand, because prayer requires understanding in one's heart. On the contrary, if one's heart does not understand what one utters with his mouth, of what use will this be to him? That's why it's better that one prays understands.
And that was the source that Rabbi Tucker was referencing. What do you think about that? this source is from about the year 1200 in Europe. Yeah, Kathy?
I actually just wrote, the point is prayer should be personal. And I personally have always struggled with Hebrew. And if I had to pray in Hebrew, I'd be in serious trouble. And I don't think it should make a difference what language you're in. Plus that we were in the diaspora. We were accumulating people. We were trying to assimilate. We were being places. And we want to be inclusive. And you can't be inclusive if you demand everybody speak one particular language.
Beautiful. Other thoughts? I see Lynn's trying to unmute yourself. Bill?
So
Bill?
I'll take the other position. We're a communal religion. We pray in a community. If it would be the Tower of Babel all over again, if every single person in the shul was praying out loud in their own language, and we wouldn't have any sense of community in that regard. And yes, we try to assimilate. Assimilation, though, does carry with it certain features that would say we're similar and not different. And I think language in many cases is that. So that's the other side of it.
And to add, and again, there's no one right side, but right, to add to that idea, right, that I could go to a synagogue in Florence, and I could go to a synagogue in Shanghai, and I can go to a synagogue in Tel Aviv, and I can go to a synagogue in Scandinavia, right? And theoretically, right, if I knew the Hebrew prayers and they were saying the Hebrew prayers, right, we had a common language in which we could pray together. Of course, there's the opposite too. Yeah, Kathy, you can respond, and then we'll get Lynn and Rob.
Well, I understand that. And I agree about the prayers, the service. And I lived in all those places, and I was comfortable in knowing all of those prayers. But when it comes to personal prayer, for us speaking to God and not being in a community service, what I was saying is I do when in Rome you do as the Romans do. But when I personally pray for me, it has to be in English because that's what I know. And I think also for women, they weren't necessarily always taught the
100%.
Hebrew. My mother came from an Orthodox home, and there were 3 sisters, and there were no males. And I think my Judaism would have been more significant had my mother been better educated. So I agree that as a community, we do as the community does. But personal prayer, when somebody is speaking to God, I think they need to speak from the heart, and they need to speak in the language that speaks to them.
Amen. And I'm wondering, when we welcome converts into the congregation, and when I work with a conversion student, or Rabbi Weiss does, we do not include Hebrew as part of the curriculum. We spend I meet with them at least 25 times every other week for a full year at minimum. We study a lot, but there is no Hebrew. I always say, we either recommend a Hebrew tutor on the side, at the same time, or like, this is the next thing you should do. But for us, Hebrew is not a requirement for conversion. And even, some Hebrew literacy is not even part of the curriculum right now. And I don't know if we're either doing them a disservice, or it's this acknowledgement that, okay, pray with your heart. Pray with your heart, and you'll sort of pick up what you pick up. Yeah, anyone else want to say something?
I think it's good when you convert somebody that you're not focusing on the Hebrew, because it's scary. There are Jews who are 60 years old who can't pick up that book and read that stuff. When I see these people who do bar and bat mitzvahs after they convert and they read this stuff in Hebrew, it's amazing. I cannot imagine learning Hebrew at my age. And when I do pray, I go back and forth. I can read the Hebrew clearly, but do I know what it all means? No way. So again, it goes back to praying in English. That's it. And what's kind of cool too is when you do go to another country and to look at the prayer, you want to see the prayer books. we're used to English Hebrew, go to France,
Mhm.
it's French Hebrew. It's like, wow, how can they do that? What a stupid question. I'll end on that.
Sandy Lawrence?
Hi, yeah, I'm one of your students that you worked with for quite a while, and I did take Hebrew lessons, still doing it on the side, because I agree there's so much to learn being a Christian my whole life. And even though being married to a Jewish man for 20 years, there was a lot. It's a whole new life and way of looking at things, let alone prayers and customs and holidays. So yeah, I agree with you. I kind of am glad that wasn't part of your education for me, because I don't think I would be converted yet.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you. Amazing student. We love you. We're so happy to have you be part of our family. By the way, as a side point, Rabbi Killip, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we read the article about the flood and Noah and the flood and that sort of idea of living in COVID. Rabbi Killip wrote that. And I don't know if we're going to listen to it later on. She actually admits that she is dyslexic and that Hebrew for her was always difficult growing up in particular, and that learning Hebrew and speaking in Hebrew was really difficult. And had she known, I think she makes this right, like had she known or been taught that, if you pray in another language, if she could pray in Hebrew and that sort of fulfilled it and that was meaningful, it sort of would have been a life changer for her earlier on in life. Anyone else want to share a comment? Yeah, Ron, and then Larry.
I want to go back to what Bill said about praying in unison and being Babel. Let's go back to where did it start that we were praying in unison? And who's to say that we should even ever open a prayer book rather than praying from our heart like Kathy wants to do? I mean, that evolved. It's not the original way.
And I think, again, I didn't hear the beginning of the podcast. I mean, I heard the podcast about 17 times, but I didn't hear it just now. But there's an idea which we haven't talked about, which is kavanah, which is intention, which is sort of like, I have to feel the prayer. And in particular, the rabbis talk about that with the Shema, that Shema means to listen, but listen meaning that we actually hear and sort of understand and get what we're saying. This morning, I think I led the minyan this morning on Zoom. And I think because I was doing it a little bit by rote, I was getting a lot of texts. And now when I'm praying, I got to look at my phone because people are sending me names for prayers and all these things during prayer. And I was leading the Amidah, the most important prayer. And I think I actually skipped, the 4 words that we've added for rain in the last month or so. I skipped that because I was just going by rote because, up until a month ago, we hadn't said it for 6 months. So I skipped it, and it was just me down, even though everyone was on Zoom, right? It just sort of went along. Right? And this was this idea that I probably didn't have the highest level of intention in my prayer. I was sort of doing by rote. I have it, but the prayers are sort of on a loop in my head, and I can just sing them, say them to myself. So I think it just went. So I think there's also an issue of praying with feeling. How about we say that? Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, I was gonna say, obviously there's 2 issues here. One is praying the liturgy and one is praying the personal prayer. I know for myself, during this service, I'm comfortable with the Hebrew, but I think for many people, at least like myself, it depends upon what you want to get at that specific time. Certain prayers, like the Amidah, I'll say in Hebrew because I feel it more. When we do the repetition, then I'll follow along in English. But I think certain prayers, I feel more communal. I have to say it as a group with people. It gives me strength. It gives me more hope that I'm doing it. But some of the prayers, even though I know them in Hebrew, are much more personal level. And so those I will actually say under my breath in English because I feel closer to them. So I kind of go back and forth, and I think people do that depending upon how the prayer speaks to them.
Very nice. Very nice. I want to look at one more text, and then I see Sandy, and then like 3 more minutes of the podcast. Yeah, Sandy.
No,
Berkeley.
I was going to say, I feel better. I mean, I too, like Sherry said at the beginning of the class, to improve my Hebrew, I follow along now with the Torah reading and the Haftorah since my bat mitzvah to improve the Hebrew, but I really don't know what I'm reading. So when I pray in English. But do we have to verbalize our prayer? Does it have to be out loud, or can we pray within our own mind? Which is a little off the subject.
Well, it's a great question, right? And by the way, I think what Sandy's, the first part of what you referred to is, we don't teach we're not taught in general, unless like me, like I've taken, 12 years of Hebrew, but right, in general, we teach what's called decoding, right? We don't teach Hebrew fluency, we teach decoding, meaning that you can pronounce the words. We teach you how to read the words aloud properly, and some basic meanings of words and basic meanings of prayers. That, if you went through Hebrew school today or Hebrew school, that is sort of the benchmark, the standard of what we teach. Obviously, we hope there's more, and we hope that kids gain a higher level of fluency, but really our students are taught decoding, right? They're taught how to pronounce the words and not necessarily meaning of each word for word. Oh wait, what was the second thing you asked, Sandy? It was good and I wanted to answer you. I forgot.
Oh, does prayer have to be verbalized?
Great. That's a good question. So the answer is yes, it shouldn't, again, I'm giving you what the Jewish law, halacha, says. It should not be just in your mind. You should say it to yourself, but only loud enough that you can hear it. Like a whisper, a loud enough whisper, so you're supposed to actually mouth it. And again, this is based on Hannah, right? She mouthed the words, she said it, but the priest couldn't hear her. And that's why he was sort of getting very angry at her. So we are supposed to pray like Hannah. We're supposed to mouth the words, actually say them, but only us and God hear them. That is the ideal prayer.
But
In
when
Hebrew,
you
it's
hear,
called balachash. Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
but when you hear hundreds of men at a, I don't know, a Lubavitch shul in Muncie, reading quietly only for themselves, you hear it. There's a level of noise.
Yes. Yeah. And the idea of that is, right, that we're not supposed to take away from anyone else's concentration factor. Obviously, places where we're singing aloud, we can sing aloud as we want, right? Some people we wish won't be as loud. I remember I heard the famous stories of Cantor Meisels and, telling some people to sing very loud and telling some people to lip sync. Whether they're true or not, I don't know, but I've been told multiple accounts. Right, so
They're true, Rabbi.
But maybe he meant, move your lips and only so you can hear. He was telling you what the proper law was. But it's a great question. I want to look at one last source, listen to a couple more minutes of the podcast, and then wrap up. Okay. So, someone want to read this next source? Do I have a reader?
I'll read.
All right. Was that Linda or Sherry here? So you both raise your hand.
Linda.
Linda, okay. We'll get Linda. Sherry, I'll get you next time. Okay, let me see.
If I can see it.
Yeah, if you can see it. Can you see this? Whoa.
Yes.
Shulchan Aruch. So this is the major law code that we still look back at. It's 500 years old.
It is possible to pray in any language one desires. This is the rule when praying together with a congregation. However, an individual praying alone should only pray in the holy language. However, some say that this requirement to only pray in Hebrew only applies when one is asking for his own personal needs, such as praying for someone who is ill or for some painful episode in his household. However, when reciting the regular liturgy established for the congregation to recite, that may be recited in any language. Furthermore, some say that even an individual requesting his own personal needs may pray for them in any language he wishes to pray, except for in the Aramaic language.
I don't love this one, actually. They sort of put it all out right. The first line is you can pray in any language. And then they qualify it. And then they start walking back the qualification sort of piece by piece by piece until the end. They say, in the end, you can really pray in any language except for Aramaic. And I'm, you know, of course, again, we pray in Aramaic. So wanted to, now let's sort of leave off with a couple more minutes of the podcast and then we'll wrap up.
Curious whether you think it's what you just said, which is the point is the
Just nod if you
experience
can
of
hear it.
gratitude, or whether the words matter.
Okay, thank you.
Because I could argue it two ways. You could say the words aren't what's important, the experience is what matters, therefore pray in the language you know. Or I could say the words matter so much that you have to understand them, so say them in the language that you know.
Beautiful. So you've really anticipated the alternate approach of Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen, often known as the Chafetz Chaim, in his work, the Be'ur Halacha on the Shulchan Aruch. So now we're zooming forward to the late 19th century, early 20th. And it's exactly that debate that you just laid out. So he quotes the Sefer Hasidim. Okay, he says, there is this view that not just are you allowed to pray in another language, but you should, if you understand it better. And he's very nervous about it. And he says, that is davka imhu yirei shamayim. That is only if the person is, I'd say, uniquely pious, uniquely kind of seeking some deep spiritual engagement, and they feel like, but this is the only way I'm going to really be able to talk to God.
It's like you pour your heart out to God in your native tongue.
Yes. So the Be'ur Halacha says, okay, that kind of person, who I think he's implying is 1 in 1,000, if not 1,000,000, sure, I can't stop that person from taking advantage of the linguistic neutrality of the halacha around tefillah to really deeply connect with God, okay? But if it's not like that, and it's simply a case of someone who is like, yeah, I don't really get Hebrew, so doing it in English seems like it'd be easier, but it's not that they're trying to reach some deep, lofty heights in terms of their experience. He really hits back in the way that you started to talk and say, no, like Hebrew has dimensions to it, kind of linguistically and literarily, that you will not capture in other languages. And he lays them out, and it's really interesting. So one is a kind of mythical thing, right? Playing off of a lot of midrashim. It's like, but, you know, God created the world in Hebrew. Or more to the point, in what language did God speak to the prophets in the Bible? In Hebrew. And that there are word plays in Hebrew that you cannot appreciate in translation, that are part of the literary texture. And at the end of the day, the liturgy that we inherited from the past is in Hebrew, even if there have been translations of it over the years, but people don't have like an inherited text in German that is the translation of the Amida, even though they do have a thing of, oh, this is my traditional communal text of the Amida. And therefore, he says, for all of those reasons and other kind of mystical connections, he says, even if we don't understand Hebrew, and it's actually interesting, he puts it as someone who clearly did, he puts it in first person, you know, even if af she'ein anu yod'in lechaven, even if we can't get the full power of all the things that this text has bequeathed to us, nonetheless, it counts. And here's the amazing phrase, Ki hatevot be'atzman po'alin kedushatan lemala. The words themselves somehow effect some kind of spiritual channel going up to God.
I think that is a lived experience for a lot of people. I think there are a lot of Jews who don't understand Hebrew, who are incredibly moved by singing Adon Olam at the end of a service. And to take that away from them, to say, well, we did some studying and we as a community have determined that those of you who don't speak Hebrew will henceforth be in the English singing section.
Am I the only one who lost the sound?
You know, that would be such a crime to those people. You'd be taking so much away, because it is totally possible for speaking.
It's okay. We were getting to the end anyway. Okay.
Oh.
So I want to wrap up anyway. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we can listen to more. I mean, it's a great podcast. If anyone's interested, I can send you the link directly to listen. I think you got the basic gist of it. I was listening on the side, right? So I think the answer is, and you know, I jotted down a couple notes when I was listening, right? That this idea that perhaps there's something uniquely special about Hebrew, which I don't think we talked about. We didn't actually say it that way, right? God created the world, right? By speaking. And what language did God use when God created the world, right? We traditionally believe it was with Hebrew, right? God spoke to Abraham, right? And the patriarchs did, Moses prayed to God, right? And our tradition is, what language did Moses actually talk to God in and pray to God in? Hebrew, right? So perhaps, again, there is something, you know, uniquely amazing about Hebrew, right? And the liturgy, you know, he also, Rabbi Tucker said, okay, like, yes, there have been translations and we've prayed in different languages, but, you know, from generation to generation, the prayer book that gets passed down in general is the Hebrew prayers. You know, that, yes, it's been, the prayers have been translated in English, except for perhaps maybe like our prayer for country, which, if you've studied with me, right, that prayer sort of, the version we use is about, you know, almost 100 years old. You know, so that might sort of fall into that level. But in general, right, the prayer, the basis of our prayers are Hebrew, right? So on one hand, it says this, and on the other hand, he says, right, English is just as legitimate to pray in, right, as long as we understand English. We understand what we're saying, and that can truly be heartfelt. So I want to reiterate what a lot of you said. You know, I am a decent Hebrew speaker. I'm prayer book Hebrew fluent. And yet, when I pray my personal prayers in the Amidah every single day, I'm praying in English. When I'm writing my notes to the Kotel, I'm writing them in English, right? So in that way, I sort of straddling both sides. I traditionally pray in Hebrew. There are oftentimes I will look at the English to get a better sense of really what I'm saying, you know, maybe to get a new look, a new meaning into the words. And I also pray in Hebrew. So I hope that you enjoyed the session. I'm happy to talk a little bit more. If people want to stay on, I want to be mindful of time. Any other sort of comments? I want to look in the next couple of weeks. I don't think next time, but in a couple of weeks, I came across a really interesting rewriting of the entire Torah in a feminine voice. I want to take a look at it, including changing the main characters have been changed from men to women and from mothers to fathers. And it's a really interesting thing. And there are a bunch of rabbis that are working on this and creating a new Torah commentary. It's called Beit Torata, but we're going to look at it together. I thought it was really fascinating and really interesting. But putting that aside, you know, I'm happy to stay on and sort of talk. I want to hear what your thoughts are based on the rest of the podcast we listened to on this. And if you need to go, please feel free to go. And thanks for learning with me. Linda?
I have a quick question. Early on, we mentioned that among the prayers that are written in Aramaic are the different Kaddishes that we say. And I understand that they were composed when Aramaic was the vernacular for most Jews. But why has it not been changed to Hebrew?
Great question. I don't know the reason why it hasn't changed. Right. There was a time where Jews spoke Aramaic, and that's probably why it was. I don't have a great answer for you.
Okay.
It's a
Maybe,
good question.
maybe someone else does.
I don't know.
Well, I have
that
a
would,
response to that. And,
yeah.
you know, I'm saying Kaddish for my mom, and I'm attending Minyan all the time. And the Kaddish, again, I don't know specifically word for word what I'm saying, but it has a certain sound and a certain rhythm. And I would posit that if we were to say, you know what, when we get to Kaddish, we're going to do it in English now, it wouldn't feel, no, I won't say it won't feel right, but it wouldn't feel the same. And I don't think it would sound right to our collective spiritual ear. So, you know, maybe it's just a continuation of those other aspects of the prayer utterance that relates to you emotionally or in your heart or however you want to say it, because you're taking this thing in these words and in this rhythm and in this length and maybe it doesn't have to do so much with the specific language that it's in, but just that enduring way that it's been.
That's what Rabbi Killip, I think, talks about. I see you, Lynn. I just want to make one comment.
It's okay.
Yeah, Linda, the Aramaic is also considered a holy language, even though there are all these texts about you can't pray in Aramaic. Aramaic is considered also a holy language in Judaism. Obviously, it's the legal language. It's the language of the Talmud. It's the language that biblical commentaries have been written in. It's the language that all legal documents are still written in. You know, if I'm writing a ketubah, a traditional ketubah, if I'm writing a get, which I do, I write it in Aramaic, not a spoken language. So this is the distinction, right? From after a certain time period, it became sort of a frozen language, not a dead language, but it was not a spoken language, just a written and studied language. So I think that perhaps the rabbis were hesitant to change the Kaddish because that Aramaic is like a sister to Hebrew, and it's still considered holy, and it was still something that, you know, scholars and everyone were still familiar with and used, whereas different than saying Arabic or French or something else. That's just an idea, though. Yeah, Lynn, you're still there?
Yeah.
Lynn.
Yes, I am. I just, when you look at Hebrew and you look at Aramaic, to me, they look the same. So how do you differentiate between them? I mean, obviously, it's like you look at French and you look at English, you know one is the other. I guess if you know Aramaic, you can look at it
right.
and
The
say
font, the font, the character, the letters are exactly the same.
Right.
Grammatically, and actually the vocabulary and grammatically, they're very different. Hebrew is a much more, I hate to say that, it's a much more beautiful, more graceful language. It flows much better. Aramaic is much sort of gruffer, tougher. I don't know. I don't have there's a lot more syllables thrown into things. Doesn't flow as evenly.
But the ketubas are still written in Aramaic these days. So if you get
A traditional ketubah.
What about the new ones?
So we offer two. So there are 4 ketubah texts. If someone gets married with me, there are 4 ketubah texts that I approve of. 2 of them are Aramaic and 2 versions are Hebrew. I use what I most recommend and that we used for our own wedding is a modern Hebrew ketubah text written originally by Rabbi Tucker, his father, not the Rabbi Tucker we listen to, but Rabbi Gordon Tucker. He composed a traditional modern Hebrew ketubah text in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe mid 90s. I'm not sure exactly when, but we were married in 2000.
Can I add something?
Yes, please, Doc.
There's something unique about our temple because Cantor Schiffman, when he sings his melodies, he knows what he is saying as compared to other cantors who do not know what they're saying. So it's very, very unique. His davening is so different from many other cantors. And let me tell you, we need to appreciate that more than just casual.
Amen. And that's what the rabbi, that's sort of part of this whole conversation is, right? It's ideal to learn Hebrew and to know what you're saying, right? And again, we didn't say this, right? The ideal is you should be davening in the language that you know, and it should be like the highest ideal is Hebrew. Okay, so now we're dealing with the question is, if you can read Hebrew, but you don't understand what Hebrew is saying, what should you, but that's really the question that we've been walking around, dancing around for the last hour, right? Is if you don't really know Hebrew, but you can decode, you can pronounce Hebrew correctly, right? Should you be praying in Hebrew where you don't really know what you're saying, but there's these traditions and these feelings that it evokes, right? And it's been said by generations and perhaps even by Abraham, right? And God. Or do we pray in English because we understand what we're saying? Any other comments? Thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are religions or there are philosophies where they are simply sounds that are made and a mantra is used. And that's sufficient to create a spiritual transcendence. And so I think for many of us, I think that's what hearing and speaking Hebrew, even without understanding it, you're in a transcendent moment simply based on the sound. And I don't think it's inappropriate. It's just a different way of thinking about it. You don't have to necessarily beat yourself up that you don't understand it all. You're communicating in a different way.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, thank you all for studying with me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to being with you next Monday.
I was just wondering
Oh.
if, is there someone at the shul who can teach Hebrew if you want to take lessons? Is there somebody who could teach?
We always have people that can teach. Yeah, if you're interested, send me an email, and we're still doing it over Zoom even. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.